The fear of humanity. The Xilari battle station floated in the darkness of space, its massive structure reflecting the dim glow of a distant sun. Inside the control room, alarms suddenly blared. Red lights flashed, and a deep, urgent voice echoed through the halls. Unidentified vessel detected, a cold, robotic voice announced. Commander Cyrex turned sharply toward his officers. His four golden eyes narrowed as he stared at the glowing screen in front of him. The station's long-range scanners showed a single ship approaching. It was not one of theirs. Origin, he demanded. A nervous officer hesitated before answering. His scaled fingers trembled as he typed on the control panel. The results made his breath catch in his throat. "Commander, it's human," the officer whispered. The control room went silent. Every officer, every soldier, every technician froze. For a moment, it was as if time had stopped. Commander Cyrex clenched his jaw. His deep purple skin darkened with tension. He had fought in wars before. He had seen entire fleets burn. But nothing filled him with as much fear as hearing that word. "Human." "Confirm," he snapped. The officer swallowed hard and checked again. His eyes widened with disbelief. "Confirmed, Commander. The ship is Terran, a battleship." Cyrex's claws dug into the armrest of his command chair. His mind raced. Humans were not supposed to be here. This sector was restricted. The Xilari Empire had declared it off-limits to all species, even their own allies. It was sacred space, an ancient battleground where secrets lay buried. And yet, the humans had come anyway. "What do they want?" Another officer murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. No one answered. No one knew. The fear runs deep. Cyrex had never faced humans directly, but he had heard the stories. Every species in the galaxy knew them. Every warrior in the Xilari Empire feared them. Humans were different. They were not the strongest species, nor the fastest. Their technology was not the most advanced. And yet they had done what no other race had dared. They had survived. While other civilizations waged wars and faded into history, humanity grew stronger. They adapted. They learned. They evolved. The Xilari had fought them once, long ago. Back then, they had believed themselves superior. Their fleets were larger. Their weapons were deadlier. Their empires stretched across the stars. And yet, they lost. Cyrex remembered the stories of that war. The Xilari had invaded a human colony, expecting an easy victory. The Terrans had fought back with everything they had, not just their soldiers, but their farmers, their workers, even their children. It had been a slaughter, but not for the humans. Xilari warships had been reduced to burning wrecks in space. Entire legions had vanished in the darkness. And the worst part, the humans did not stop. When the war ended, the Xilari believed it was over. They believed humans would be satisfied with their victory. But humans never forget. They did not just push the Xilari out of their space. They followed them. They studied them. They learned their weaknesses. And when the humans came again, they did not come for war. They came for revenge. The Empire barely survived that war. It was a wound that still had not healed. And now, after all these years, a human warship was here. Alone. A silent threat. Cyrex inhaled deeply, pushing the memories away. He focused on the present. "Send a warning," he ordered. A communications officer obeyed, transmitting a sharp, clear message. "Human vessel, you are in restricted space. Leave immediately, or we will respond with force." Silence. The human ship did not respond. It did not slow down. It did not change course. It just kept coming. Cyrex felt a chill crawl down his spine. The ship was moving with purpose. It was not lost. It was not afraid. It knew exactly where it was going. He turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the defense cannons." "Commander," the officer hesitated. His voice shook. "Do we really want to start a fight with humans again?" Cyrex clenched his teeth. No, he thought. He did not. But they might not have a choice. The first contact. The Xilari battle station stood firm in the cold void of space, its weapons systems warming up, its defenses preparing for the worst. Inside, Commander Xyrex sat frozen in his command chair, watching the human battleship drift closer, unshaken, unbothered. The room was eerily silent except for the occasional beep of scanning instruments. Officers glanced at each other, fear in their eyes. The warnings had been sent. The message was clear: turn back or be destroyed. But the humans didn't answer. Instead, the massive Terran warship, now fully visible on the station's main screen, pressed forward, its dark metallic hull absorbing the faint light of the system's dying sun. One of the younger officers, barely past his training, swallowed hard and whispered, "Why aren't they responding?" No one answered. The question itself carried a terrible truth. They didn't have to. The voice of the humans. A sudden ping filled the air. The control panel flashed. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced, his voice strained. Xyrex straightened in his seat. His clawed fingers hovered over the control console. He took a breath, steadying himself, then nodded. "Open the channel." The screen flickered to life. At first, there was only static. Then a face emerged, human, a man with short-cropped silver hair and deep-set, unshaken eyes. His uniform was black, adorned with the insignia of the Terran Defense Fleet. His face was calm, his expression unreadable. Then he spoke. "This is Captain Darius Kane of the Terran warship Iron Vengeance. We have business in this sector. Stand down." The words were not a request. They were a command. Xyrex's stomach tightened. The humans weren't here for war. They weren't here for negotiations. They were here for something. And they didn't care about the consequences. The silence in the room deepened. No one moved. No one dared breathe. Xyrex's throat was dry, but he forced himself to respond. "This is High Warlord Tyrex of the Xilari Empire. You are violating restricted space. Leave immediately, or we will open fire." Captain Kane's face did not change. His cold, dark eyes stared into the screen like he was already 5 steps ahead of them. Then he spoke again, slowly, firmly. "Fire at us, and you will regret it." The channel cut off, a decision that could change everything. For a long moment, no one spoke. Xyrex felt the weight of the situation pressing down on him. The tension in the room was suffocating. This was not how it was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to obey the laws of the Xilari Empire. They were supposed to fear consequences. They were supposed to listen. But they didn't. They never did. His mind raced. His pride demanded that he give the order. Fire upon the human ship. Teach them a lesson. Remind them who controlled this sector. But deep down, he knew the truth. Attacking this battleship could start a war that Xilari might not survive. "Commander," one of the officers finally broke the silence. His voice trembled. What do we do?" Xyrex's jaw clenched. His mind screamed at him to attack, to drive the humans away. And yet, he hesitated. Outside, the human battleship continued its slow, deliberate approach. It did not fire its weapons. It did not change its course. It was waiting for them to make the first move. And suddenly, Xyrex realized. That was the most terrifying thing of all. The firefight begins. The Xilari battle station trembled under the weight of the moment. Every officer in the command room felt it, the suffocating tension of impending battle. The human warship, Iron Vengeance, continued its relentless approach. No hesitation, no fear. Commander Xyrex's fingers twitched over the control panel. His mind was torn. Attack and risk war, or stand down and lose face. A warning shot, that would be enough. A show of power. A reminder that this was Xilari space. He inhaled sharply, making his decision. Fire a warning shot. The weapons officer hesitated. "Sir, if we do it." Zyrex snapped, his voice sharp as a blade. The station's main cannon hummed to life, charging with a deep, pulsing energy. A second later, a searing beam of plasma lanced across the void, slicing just past the human battleship, a direct warning. For the first time, the Iron Vengeance stopped. The command room was silent. Every auxiliary officer leaned forward, waiting for the human's response. A second passed, then another. And then, the human warship fired back. A single shot that changed everything. Unlike the auxiliary's warning shot, the humans did not miss. A deafening explosion shook the battle station as the Iron Vengeance fired a single railgun round. An auxiliary war cruiser, stationed near the base, took the hit and was instantly torn apart. The officers in the command room watched in horror as the cruiser's broken remains floated lifelessly into the void. One shot, one kill. A terrified whisper escaped one of the younger officers. Impossible. Zyrex's blood ran cold. The auxiliary fleet was built on advanced shielding technology, energy-based defenses that could withstand most attacks. But the humans, they used kinetic weapons, railguns, weapons that fired at near-light speed, punching through shields like they were nothing. And this wasn't just any railgun. The Iron Vengeance had just obliterated an entire war cruiser with a single shot. Zyrex's hands tightened into fists. He had underestimated them. The moment of fear. Alarms blared. Auxiliary officers rushed to battle stations. The fleet's defense grid activated, warships locking onto the human vessel. "Commander, we need to attack now," one officer yelled. But Zyrex didn't respond. Because at that moment, something terrifying became clear to him. The humans weren't panicking. They weren't retreating. They weren't scrambling to defend themselves. They had fired one shot. And now they were waiting. Waiting to see if the auxiliary were foolish enough to try again. Zyrex swallowed hard. This wasn't war. This was a warning. The humans weren't here to fight. They weren't here to conquer. They were sending a message. Do not test us. And suddenly, for the first time in his career, Zyrex hesitated. His claws dug into the command chair, his pride screaming at him to retaliate. But his mind knew better. This battle was already over. He could order an all-out attack, but at what cost? How many ships would fall before they even scratched the Iron Vengeance? He could see it now. The headlines, the records, the history books. The auxiliary empire fired first. The humans ended it. His officers looked at him, waiting for his command. And slowly, through gritted teeth, Zyrex gave his order. Stand down. A single breath filled the room. Relief, confusion, fear. And on the battlefield, the Iron Vengeance did not move. It had made its point. And now, it waited. The hidden truth. The auxiliary battle station sat in eerie silence. The war alarms still flashed, but no one moved. No more orders were given. No more shots were fired. On the main screen, the Iron Vengeance hovered like a predator that had already decided the battle's outcome. Commander Zyrex clenched his jaw, his pride wounded. The humans had fired only once, yet they had already won. His officers still waited for his command, but he remained silent. His mind raced. Why were the humans here? They weren't here to attack. They could have wiped out the station by now, but they didn't. So what were they after? Zyrex turned to his scanning officer. Run a deep scan of their ship. The officer hesitated. Sir, if they detect us scanning, they already know we're watching. Zyrex growled. Do it. The scanner hummed to life, its waves silently probing the Iron Vengeance. A few tense moments passed. Then the officer's eyes widened. Commander, they're carrying something. Zyrex's brow furrowed. What? The officer's hands shook as he enhanced the image. A cargo hold near the center of the ship was heavily shielded, almost impossible to scan. But through faint energy readings, something inside was clear. An artifact. Ancient. Powerful. Cyrex's stomach dropped. The secret of the forbidden sector. The Xilari Empire had declared this sector restricted for a reason. It was once the site of a great battle, long before the humans reached the stars. And buried deep in the ruins of forgotten warships were secrets, technology from a lost civilization. The Xilari had spent decades searching, studying, hiding these artifacts from the rest of the galaxy. And yet, somehow, the humans had found one. Cyrex felt his claws grip the chair tighter. How? Had they intercepted old records? Had they sent spies? Or worse, had they been here before? A wave of unease washed over him. If the humans had recovered a lost artifact, what did they plan to do with it? His thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alert. A stealth drone, one of their own, was moving toward the Iron Vengeance. The humans know everything. Cyrex's eyes snapped to the drone operator. Who launched that? The officer paled. I didn't. It was automatic. The station AI. The drone zipped forward, scanning the Iron Vengeance's cargo hold. A risky move. A dangerous move. For a second, Cyrex almost hoped the humans wouldn't notice. But then, boom! A small explosion lit up the screen. The drone had been destroyed in an instant. Cyrex's heart pounded. The humans knew they were being watched. The command room filled with a harsh, sharp sound. An incoming transmission. Put it through, Cyrex ordered. The screen flickered. Captain Darius Kane appeared again. His expression was cold, unreadable. But his next words sent a chill down Cyrex's spine. You just made a mistake. Cyrex forced his voice to remain steady. You are trespassing in Xilari space. You are carrying something that does not belong to you. Captain Kane's eyes narrowed. It was never yours to claim. Cyrex inhaled sharply. The humans knew. They knew about the lost artifacts. They knew about the ancient war. They weren't here to steal. They were here to reclaim. Cyrex felt the weight of the moment press against him. If he made the wrong move now, it wouldn't just be a battle. It would be a war. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't sure that Xilari would survive it. The final standoff. A thick silence filled the Xilari battle station's command room. Every officer, every soldier, every technician held their breath. The tension in the air was suffocating. On the main screen, Captain Darius Kane stared down Commander Cyrex, his expression calm, but his eyes sharp as a blade. It was never yours to claim. Those words echoed in Cyrex's mind. The humans knew. They weren't just trespassing. They had come for something specific. Cyrex's claws tapped rhythmically against the armrest of his command chair. He could feel his officers staring at him, waiting for a decision. If he ordered an attack, it would start a battle that Xilari might not win. If he backed down, it would be an insult to the Empire. But something told him this wasn't just about pride anymore. This was about survival. A dangerous gamble. Cyrex leaned forward, voice low and controlled. You took something from this sector. An artifact that belongs to the Xilari Empire. Captain Kane didn't blink. It was never yours. The room tensed. A few officers shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to prepare for war or listen. Cyrex pressed on. If you do not surrender the artifact, we will be forced to take it back. Captain Kane exhaled slowly. Then he spoke in a voice so calm it was terrifying. You could try. The words sent a chill through the room. Not a threat. A fact. Cyrex knew that tone. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't bravado. It was certainty. The humans had calculated every possible response, and they were prepared for all of them. A race against time. A young officer hesitated before stepping forward. His voice was barely above a whisper. Commander, we are outgunned. Cyrex turned sharply. Explain. The officer swallowed hard. We just completed a secondary scan of their ship. The Iron Vengeance is equipped with Class IV kinetic cannons, upgraded railguns, and reinforced battle plating. Hyrex stiffened. Class IV kinetic cannons, weapons designed to shatter moons. And the humans brought them here. This isn't a standard battleship, the officer continued. It's a war machine. Cyrex's jaw tightened. The auxiliary fleet was powerful, but it was built for energy-based combat, shields, plasma weaponry, and high-speed maneuvering. But the humans, they specialized in brute force. Their ships didn't just fight, they ended fights. And the Iron Vengeance was staring them down, daring them to make a move. The breaking point. Cyrex's thoughts raced. The Empire had to maintain its honor. They couldn't just let the humans walk away. But the reality was clear. A battle now would be suicide. Still, his pride refused to accept it. "We cannot just let them go," he muttered. Captain Kane's voice cut through the silence. "You don't have a choice. A challenge. A final test." And deep down, Cyrex knew he had already lost. He could order the attack. He could ignite a war. Or he could live to fight another day. He took a slow breath, then spoke the words he never thought he would say. "Stand down." Gasps filled the room. Some officers stared at him in disbelief. Others looked relieved. Cyrex's gaze didn't waver. There was no victory in senseless destruction. The transmission remained open. Captain Kane didn't smirk, didn't gloat. He simply nodded. Smart choice. And with that, the Iron Vengeance turned away. A silent threat. The auxiliary officers watched as the Terran warship engaged its thrusters, moving out of restricted space. But Cyrex knew the truth. This was not over. The humans had come for something. They had taken it. And worst of all, they had left unchallenged. That meant one terrifying thing. They would be back. Cyrex leaned back in his chair, watching the human ship disappear into the void. And as the tension in the room faded, a cold realization settled into his mind. The auxiliary were no longer the masters of this sector. The humans were. And the galaxy would never be the same again. The unexpected exit. The Iron Vengeance drifted silently through the darkness of space, its engine humming softly as it prepared to leave. The battle station scanners followed the Terran warship's every move, yet no one dared make a sound. Inside the auxiliary command room, Commander Cyrex sat frozen, his eyes locked onto the massive human warship. It had done the impossible, defied the auxiliary empire, stood its ground, and left without a scratch. His officers waited for him to say something, to issue a final command. But what was there left to say? The humans had come. They had taken what they wanted, and they had left. No fear, no hesitation, no consequences. The ghost signal. Just as the Iron Vengeance approached the edge of the sector, a sudden ping flashed on the battle station's control panel. An unidentified signal. Around. What is that? The scanning officer's hands trembled as he analyzed the signal. "Sir, it's coming from the human ship." A message, a simple data burst. It contained a single set of coordinates. The officer hesitated before speaking again. The location. It's deep inside auxiliary-controlled space. Cyrex's stomach tightened. The humans had sent them a message. But why? A final warning. Before he could react, the comms officer gasped. "Sir, another transmission." Cyrex's jaw clenched. He already knew who it was. The screen flickered, and Captain Darius Kane appeared one last time. His face was calm. No gloating, no smugness. Just a quiet, unnerving confidence. "You want to know what we took?" he asked, voice steady. Cyrex didn't answer. He simply stared. Captain Kane leaned slightly forward. "You should be asking yourself, why was it buried in your space to begin with?" The connection cut off. And then, before the auxiliary fleet could react, The Iron Vengeance vanished into hyperspace. The weight of the unknown. Silence filled the command room. The war alarms powered down. The scanners reset. The threat was gone. But the fear remained. Xirex stared at the empty void where the human warship had once been. The coordinates still blinked on the screen. Why would the humans send them this? If this was meant to be a warning, it was a strange one. If it was meant to be a threat, it was even worse. One officer spoke in a hushed voice. "Commander, do we follow the coordinates?" Xirex didn't respond immediately. His mind was racing, piecing together the possibilities. If the humans had found something buried in auxiliary space, something powerful enough to bring them here, then what else had been hidden? And more importantly, who hid it there? Xirex slowly rose from his seat. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "Prepare a scout ship." The officer hesitated. "But Commander, if we... I want to know what they found." Asterisk, his voice was sharper now. "And I want to know before they do." Asterisk. The officers scrambled into action. The humans had left. The battle had ended. But the real war was only beginning. The aftermath and mystery. The auxiliary battle station drifted in silence, its weapons powered down, its fleet still frozen in the wake of the human battleship's departure. But Commander Xirex knew this was not the end. The humans had taken something buried deep in auxiliary space for centuries. And then, instead of vanishing without a trace, they had sent back coordinates. A challenge, a warning, or something worse. Xirex's claws tapped against the command chair's armrest, his mind running through the possibilities. He had to act fast. He turned to his officers. "Send a scout ship, quietly. I want to know what is at those coordinates." The officers hesitated but obeyed. Within minutes, auxiliary stealth frigate launched from the station, its engines humming as it entered hyperspace. Xirex watched it disappear, his chest heavy with an uneasy feeling. The dark truth. Hours passed. The command room remained silent, every officer waiting for the scout team's report. Then, a transmission came through. "Commander Xirex, we've arrived at the coordinates." Xirex straightened in his chair. "Report." The scout pilot's voice was shaky. "Sir, you need to see this." A live video feed appeared on the main screen. At first, it showed nothing but empty space. Then the camera adjusted, revealing the outline of something massive, ancient, and dead. A derelict warship. No, a graveyard of warships. Xirex's breath hitched. The remains of dozens of ships, some older than the auxiliary empire itself, floated in the darkness. Shattered hulls, melted metal, debris drifting endlessly. But it was the largest wreck that caught Xirex's eye. A ship miles long, its design unlike anything he had ever seen. Old, powerful, alien, and near its center, a massive hole. The artifact was gone. The humans had already taken it. Xirex's fists clenched. "Scan the wreck. What are we dealing with?" A long pause. Then the scanning officer's voice came through, weak and afraid. "Sir, this technology isn't auxiliary. It isn't anything in our records." Xirex felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Another pause. Then, in a whisper, the officer said, "It's older than the Empire, older than the war that once took place here. Commander, we may not be the first to rule this part of the galaxy. The true enemy?" Xirex's mind reeled. If the artifact was from this ship, if the humans had taken it, what did they know that the auxiliary didn't? More importantly, what were they planning to do with it? And the most terrifying thought of all, what if the artifact wasn't just a weapon, but a warning? Xirex turned away from the screen, his voice hard as steel. "Recall the scout team. We need to report this to the High Council." One officer hesitated. "Commander, if the humans have already taken the artifact, does that mean they have an advantage?" Xyrex's eyes darkened. No. He exhaled sharply. It means they know something we don't. His gaze drifted back to the empty void of space where the iron vengeance had vanished. And for the first time in his life, Xyrex felt a deep, creeping sense of fear. The humans weren't here to start a war. They were preparing for one. But against who?